So you're telling me that there's someone who has been trafficked in America.
Correct. Yes. I think that's shocking sometimes, especially when you start looking at numbers.
How's that possible that we don't see it? Hello and welcome to The Movement. This is a podcast where we're going to resource, empower, and develop leaders who are interested in the fight against human trafficking. Episode 1. So welcome. And a very special guest this morning, Dennis Mark. So welcome.
Good morning, David. Thank you for having me in this first podcast of The Movement.
Ever.
Yeah.
So for RedM, we have a great history with Redeemed. One of the number one questions people ask us is, what does RedM mean? And originally, I joined your board, and then RedM started because I could see there was need for resources from outside. And so we were literally called Redeemed Marketing Shrunk Down to RedM.
Correct. Yes.
And anybody who watched us early goes, is it the same thing? So I get that all the time. So not the same thing, but we are partners, and we've continued to support each other and try and help where we can with Redeemed. So
yeah, it's been a great journey. I can't even remember how long it's been now. It's been kind of all
I can
runs
tell you
together.
exactly.
Can you? Yeah.
7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, it goes by very quickly.
Yeah. So yeah, 7 years. So let's get off to the beginning. We'll talk a bit about you. Let's start with kind of give people a bit of context of what Redeemed is, what you do. What would be your, I meet you for the first time, give me a quick, what does Redeemed do?
So it's really in our mission statement of what Redeem does, and that is that we provide restoration services through a trauma-informed holistic approach to women who have been recovered from sex trafficking.
Okay.
And we partner with community partners and corporations and individual faith communities to provide those resources to those women who can find a way out of exploitation and need to rebuild their lives so they can become self-sustaining, independent, successful, according to their definition of success, not ours.
So you're telling me that there's someone who has been trafficked in America.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's shocking sometimes, especially when you start looking at numbers. But in the years that Redeemed has existed, we're starting to celebrate our 20th year as an organization.
20 years. So 20 years ago, a person was trafficked.
20 years ago, a person was trafficked. And then we're just learning really about it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So we're still considered pioneers in this field, even though we have 20 years under our belt. And so
that makes sense because, I mean, you hear people, it seems new, it seems new in the common terminology. But if 20 years you were learning, it wasn't new then, it was just people were starting to recognize it. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, when Redeemed was formed, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act had just been enacted in the year 2000. So we were just 5 years into the fight when we got started. And so it has come a long way. I remember in the early days of Redeemed, there was not a lot of resources. There was not a lot of activity, a lot of unknowns. I remember communicating with the communities, law enforcement, churches, companies, individuals that just really didn't understand what it was. It was a misunderstanding of what it was.
How is that? If it's real, which you're telling me it is, I know it is. I'm going to say a lot of things here that will seem weird to you. It's just part of trying to be in the shoes of someone listening.
Right.
If that's real, what? How? Where? How can it be around us? How could it be big? I hear it's big all the time. How's that possible that we don't see it?
Well, I think, that was one of the things that I learned early on as we were doing outreach in adult entertainment industry, commercial sex, and primarily in the strip club areas.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, again, had this idea that a lot of the women working in those places were there on their own free accord. They were just doing it because they were working their way through school or just whatever.
Which is the story that gets told.
That gets told, correct. And it wasn't until really, we were doing outreach. We had an idea that something was happening bigger than what we were seeing. We just couldn't put your finger on it. Ended up going to a conference in 2008 to the United Nations Global Initiative to Fight Trafficking in Vienna, Austria. And that's really where I heard for the first time.
You're going to Vienna. Okay, you
Yeah.
just lost me on you're going to Vienna.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. But how interesting. Yeah.
So I went there and learned about human trafficking
Yeah.
and the different categories that are there. And,
Right.
and of course, one of those categories was sex trafficking, and understanding the dynamics of that, the terminology, the definitions, and all of that, and seeing that this is not something that's isolated to one part of the world. It is a global, has a global impact on people's lives. And so came back from that conference and with a different set of glasses, as it were.
Yeah.
I had a different lens now to look through. And so that really changed the dynamics of how we were operating as an organization at that time, is that even in the way that we did our outreach work and the way we were communicating with the women. And we kind of shifted our focus from the strip clubs to the illicit massage businesses and some of the street stuff that was going on at the time.
So you're saying illicit massage businesses. People may not know what you're talking about. So
Yeah, so we're talking about
with that.
erotic massage parlors. You see them all over the place. And of course,
So people think these are just massage parlors. So
Correct.
you're saying something. Can you? So people are going there to buy sex.
Correct. Yeah. There's our legitimate massage businesses out there, but they typically don't have access to websites where they're promoting these businesses as sexually oriented businesses.
Okay.
And so
you can track that and trail that and
Correct.
see that that's real.
Yeah, there's actually websites that are dedicated to customer reviews of these establishments, and so
Wow,
you can learn a lot about what goes on in the behind the doors of
It's
these establishments from the people
5
who visit.
stars, 4 stars.
Correct. You have to
Really?
learn a whole new language when you're going into these places, because
Okay.
they have codes, words for different things. And
Wow.
again, we won't get into that because
No,
it's
this
we want to
isn't
be family
that
friendly.
kind of show.
Right.
We're not trying to train you. We're trying to into
Right.
how to access. We're trying to
Right.
educate you on what's really happening. And so inside of that, inside of strip clubs and prostitution, you're saying people are not getting paid?
They may be getting paid, but they're not keeping their money. That's the thing. So
Wow.
you may be paying for a woman's time with her,
Yeah.
but that money quickly comes out of her hand and goes into either an individual trafficker or even a criminal ring that may be organizing these kind of events going on in these massage parlors. It just depends. It's not one size fits all, and it's not a standard way of acting the way they do.
So the buyer goes in and experiences this thing,
Correct.
and walks away going, victimless crime.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it comes down to the communication of what people believe or expect based on their experiences of how entertainment promotes it. And so it's something. It's always like, for the women that are in these places, depending on where you go, what type of massage business it is, can determine how the woman behaves in that space, right? So depending on their background, where they come from. I've seen in the fact of a lot of women coming maybe from China.
Yeah.
They're sold into this by their family members,
Wow.
and there's an actual honor to this, because now it's something that the family is requiring of them to do to support the family, and so to walk away from it dishonors the family.
Wow.
So they're less likely to outcry for help. And again, then you have other women that are in there because they're controlled by a local pimp or a trafficker, an organized crime ring, whoever that has control over them. And typically, there's a disconnect between the actual person being in these places and the actual massage business. There's a rule there kind of to create what's called plausible deniability. And that means that when you, as a customer, you go in and you pay a door fee, you're paying that door fee to the business to get access to the woman. But that doesn't give you the access to use the woman as you wish. You have to negotiate that with the woman. And she may have a quota that's been set for her for that day, So she has to calculate what it costs her to work in that space because she's renting that space to work in. And then she has to make a certain amount for whoever her trafficker is at that time.
So you're saying trafficker. So basically, in this model, they're getting some money. They're getting no money.
They're getting money that's coming to them, but part of that goes to either the business itself or to the trafficker. But they don't really keep.
So technically, they're not making a lot of money.
Correct, if any.
If any.
And if money they do make usually goes back to their family.
Right.
If they're from a foreign country, right?
Okay, so that's so if you ask people, human trafficking, sex trafficking. Oh yeah, that's a foreign issue. That's either happening in other countries or it's people from other countries brought here.
Right.
Is that the story?
No, it's not the complete story. And the complete story is that majority of women who are trafficked in the United States are actually American citizens.
Majority.
Yeah, when we're talking the work there of about probably between 75 and 85% of the victims that are sex trafficking victims are actually domestic victims.
How do we know that?
That comes from different law enforcement studies, encounters with law enforcement as they're doing investigation work.
Wow.
They're identifying the women, and so majority of those are domestic.
So the question on everyone's mind, I wasn't really going to go down this journey, but here we are.
Here we are.
How would that happen? Is this a poverty thing? How do they get women, I assume men, boys, how do they get them into that situation?
So that's a deep hole we have to go down. There's lots of different aspects to that, and so it really comes down to vulnerabilities. And so vulnerabilities can be socioeconomic vulnerabilities. It can be educational vulnerabilities. It can be relational vulnerabilities. Things that happen during developmental stages of a child. A lot of things that create these vulnerabilities just puts this person at risk. There's a thing called an adverse childhood effect scale that is used by different people to measure what is the possibility of somebody being exploited. And it actually has far-reaching effects into their future as an adult, even from a health perspective. And so there's a scale of 10 questions. And typically you answer yes on any one of these 10 and you're at risk of being vulnerable to exploitation.
Wow.
Typically what our experience at Redeemed has been is we have our women who have anywhere from 6 to 8 of these childhood experiences that has affected them and created the vulnerabilities. And so it's a matter of exploiting the vulnerabilities for profit. That's what exploitation is. That's what commercial sexual exploitation looks like.
So they identify. How do they go find a person?
Sometimes it's as simple as going to a mall. It's simple as sending somebody into a school to recruit another person using like a peer support.
School like
high schools, junior highs, and so there's
so age is
not relative to this. And we've seen victims that are from as young as 8 years old all the way up to 60 years old. So age is not a factor in this.
Okay. So it's more finding access. I've got to believe internet. I mean,
correct.
How does that work?
So a lot of times, social media plays a big factor in this, right? Yeah. And I've had those conversations with parents, and it's about it. It's not about control of your child. It's about being informed about your child. I always tell people it's easier for you to be a hard parent on the front end rather than being a heartbroken parent on the back end.
Wow. So you're saying the softening of parenting, the loosening of kids is making them vulnerable.
Correct. I mean, you think about the fact that if you go into a restaurant and you're watching a family interact at the table, a majority of the time you're going to see people with their faces in their phones. Yeah. And there's been cases.
Wow, so that's a factor.
It is. Because, again, it's about this disconnect that families have with their children. They're trusting too much in technology to entertain their child. Wow. And it opens the door for people to take advantage of that situation. Yeah. And so, again, I've had this conversation with parents and said, well, I live in a nice neighborhood. I live in a gated community. I live in a nice home. And I'll say, well, that's great. Have you ever told your child no? Like maybe they've seen something on a social media platform, or Facebook or someplace, that a friend of theirs is getting this or having that or doing this, and they've come to you and said, yes, I want to do this, and you've told them no.
Yeah.
And I tell them at that point in time, there is somebody out there on the internet they're communicating with that will tell them yes.
Right.
And lure them
And as
into a
kids,
situation.
we all were longing for someone to tell us something different than our parents were telling us.
Right. It comes down to a simple fact of, people would call it attention seeking, and it's really not attention seeking. It's more care seeking. Do you care about me? Are you giving me the love, affection, and attention that I need in my developmental stages of my life? And if you're not, somebody will for them do that.
So I get that. I get here's some vulnerability. How do you bridge vulnerability to now I'm in a brothel being sold? What is that?
So that grooming process is what we call it, the stages of entry. The grooming process is simply identifying that person who is vulnerable, and then creating a relationship with them. Right? You're finding out what they're needing in that relationship, and if you can provide that to them, you're giving that love, affection, and attention that they're so desperately seeking to be seen, to be heard, and all that, and develop that relationship. In that process, you're developing the relationship. You're going to isolate them from their support systems. You're going to separate them from their families. You're going to separate them from their friends, and they're going to be solely dependent.
Because you're fulfilling their needs, you're also messaging them. These people don't fulfill your needs.
Correct.
I'm a better adult or human, or
I'm a better caregiver for you than your parents are. And
it sounds like a cult.
It does.
Sounds like that process where no one joins a cult.
Correct. Right.
They just
happen
in the
into
process, as human brains are.
It's the old adage of putting a frog in a pot, right, and slowly turning the water
up. So it's time.
up.
So time's a factor in this? Is it not an overnight grab you in the street and then do that?
Typically not, because the brain functions differently when you're a kidnap victim than it is when you are groomed into a relationship.
So are you, as the person being drawn in, are you believing a lie and saying I'm choosing this?
I mean, that's what comes down to. At the point in time when you've created this sense of isolation now, all right, you're the only person in this person's life. You're it. There's nobody else that you can depend on or that loves you like this person, right? And then comes the capitalization of that relationship. And you draw a line in the sand, basically, and saying, look, I need you to do me a favor. I've spent all this time. I mean, I've spent money on you. We've had a lot of good times together, but I need you to do this favor for me. And if you love me, you'll do this for me.
Wow.
All right? And so now the person's looking at, well, who else do I have to go back to? I don't have my family.
Oh, they've burned the bridges.
They've burned the bridges. They've acted out. They've broken curfews. They've skipped school. They've done these different things. And so now they've drawn a line saying, I need you to do this for me if you love me. And, of course, there's always going to be a hesitation there. Right?
That's what you think is why I always think, why not run?
Right, why not run? But again, where are you going to run to? It's not a choice, it's a lack of options.
Wow.
And so now the question becomes, what do I do here, right? And so the magic line that a lot of pimps and traffickers will use is, well, you must not love me as much as I love you, or you do this for me.
Wow.
And in that moment, the person has a choice to make. And typically they will make that choice of, I cannot afford to not have this relationship. I can't.
It's a literal gaslighting process.
It is, yes. And so that person steps across that line willingly of their own free volition. And
now I did something that I'm not proud of.
Right. In my experiences working with law enforcement, and you're talking to a victim it's out on the street in the back of a police car, and you ask them, why are you doing this? I chose this. This is what I do. I got into this. I made a bad decision, and this is where I'm at now. And so they just accepted their lot in life, as it were, because they believe that we've had women that have still struggle with this today. They're out, they're in healthy relationships, they're doing well, but they still struggle with the fact that I chose this. Okay. And it wasn't really a choice. It was a manipulation of who they were and what they needed.
So the work you do, it's got to be, I mean, I assume this is traumatic. The whole experience is traumatic. So one area I would think is trauma.
Correct.
But also you're telling me deprogramming
It is.
part of that?
And we use the word like rewiring the brain, right? Because the brain creates neural pathways for survival, right, in these moments, right? And so you're having to rewrite the brain on how it logically processes things, right? So there's three basic components of trauma. One, there's an event or an event. And this can either be an act of violence or a threat of act of violence. It doesn't actually have to be a physical violence. It can be just a threat of.
Wow.
Or the threat of violence against someone else. It doesn't have to be against a person. It can be against a family member.
Oh, right.
Anything, right?
Friend, whatever.
Right. And then it creates an experience. An experience can be humiliation, guilt, shame, all these different emotions that are created.
It sounds like complicit. Like I chose this. I'm in this.
Yeah.
Like this is just who I am. Is that accurate? They're
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it goes to the effects, and there's three major components to the effects of trauma, and that is not being able to benefit from relationships because again you've been harmed in relationships.
Yeah.
You've trusted somebody, and now they violated that trust. There's an inability to cognitively process choices that have been made and understanding consequences of those choices. And then finally, there's a dysregulation of emotions and behaviors.
Yeah.
And so trauma, we respond to trauma in different ways. There's four major ways: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so you have these trauma responses that create the inability to function normally in normal stress.
Yeah.
And so you become disassociated, dysregulated, and you can't live in a normal existence because now your brain's in survival mode. Your lower part of your brain is not communicating with the upper part of your brain.
What a intense psychological understanding you have to develop, to really do this work.
And that's why, Redeemed, it's not about the speed of the healing. It's about the quality of the healing.
Wow.
It doesn't happen overnight, right? While it can, a bad decision can be made in 1 second, right? The consequences of that bad decision last a lifetime. It doesn't. Trauma never goes away.
I was going to ask how long, but lifetime is the answer. Is you've had that experience, you're not going to unhave the experience.
Correct. It's always going to be there. All we're helping the women in our program do is have the appropriate tools to manage the trauma.
So if let's say that this is quite a thought. What if someone helped them, got them away from the situation, and then said, "Okay, freedom." What I'm hearing is that's not going to work, or what?
No, I think a lot of people think the answer is a bed. Just give them a place to live.
Yeah, just get them away.
Just get them away. Get them out of the situation.
They'll be fine.
Yeah, and that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Again, a part of that process is that stages of change that they have to go through. Right there, there's a what we call pre-contemplative stage, and the pre-contemplative stage is where you understand your circumstances and you're just accepted it, right? And I always use the example of being on a diet, right? I
don't know what that is.
Yeah,
but sure, use the example.
We're happy with where we are in life, right? We accept the fact that we're eating unhealthy.
Right.
We're good with it. But then there comes a stage of what we call the contemplative stage, where something about the reality that you're living in changes. And for most people, like in the dieting realm, you go to the doctor, and of course, the first place you go when you go to a doctor's office is you step on a scale, and you get to visualize your circumstance, right? And you realize I've got a problem here, right? Even when the nurse or the doctor tells you you got a problem here, and you have a choice. When you leave the doctor's office, you have a choice. You can either continue in your pre-contemplative state, or you're going to make a plan. I'm gonna change the course of my life, right?
Yeah.
And so you make a plan, and you create this idea of how you're going to change your situation, right? So you enact this action stage.
Right.
I always use the example. The most famous day for starting a diet is on Mondays, right? Because you're going to have the weekend to get rid of your leftover pizza in the refrigerator. And then Monday comes, and you wake up in the morning and you have your breakfast, your healthy breakfast, turkey bacon, egg whites, right? And you're good to go.
You know too much.
Right. And then you have a salad for lunch with low fat dressing, and you're doing great. So now you're in the maintenance stage of this stages of change. And then you're driving your way home in the freeway, and you've encountered some stress, right? You had a hard day Monday at work.
You know my Monday.
Yeah, and you get home and you turn the TV on, and the first thing you see is a Domino's pizza commercial.
Right.
It
has your name written on it.
It has your name written on it, and I always say that that's when what we call the F it switch kicks in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't want to.
EFFIT.
Exactly.
Okay, good. Just checking.
And so we end up what we call relapsing. Right.
Yeah.
You go right back to the pre-contemplative state. I don't care. And so for the women,
right.
That stage of change for them is they live in a contemplative stage. They may encounter a pre-contemplative or a contemplative stage where something about that reality changes. They get pregnant, they get arrested, they get violently raped, beat down. Something happens to that reality they're living in.
So that's a big part of exit.
It is. It can be.
Let me just ask: do they call your number? I mean, do they? How do they come to you from that?
Typically, they come to us through referral agencies, through law enforcement.
Okay,
right?
Okay.
We've had cases.
They get out and call someone.
Yeah, we had a case one time where a woman, she shoplifted actually in front of a police officer in Walmart just so she could get arrested.
Wow.
And she had $1,500 in her pocket, but was wanted to shoplift so she could get arrested to get away from her pimp.
Wow.
And so that was her plan.
Okay.
That was her action stage.
Right.
And of course, then she goes in that maintenance stage. And then the problem with maintenance stage for a lot of these women is now they're going to deal with emotions and memories and intrusive thoughts and nightmares that they've never really taken notice of before, never processed
So are you saying
before.
that psychologically they're blocking until...
Right, they're disassociated, they're heavily medicated, maybe they're using something that's helping them get through the day. Typically when we ask that question, we don't ask them, what are you using? We ask them, what do you use to get by?
Right.
Well, there's
It's an assumption as well.
Right, and we had one woman, in fact, education was her coping mechanism. She didn't use any drugs,
right?
But if she was so busy in school while being trafficked, that was how she dealt with the trafficking.
Just the thought. You say that like, hey, guess what? That's just reality here. But that someone's going through school and being trafficked is for most people.
She was sitting in the classroom all day long with people.
You just broke an image that everybody has, that I'm locked in a room tied to something.
Right. She graduated with a triple degree from the University of Texas.
My goodness.
While being trafficked.
We walk around people. That's what you're telling me. We walk around people who are trafficked.
Correct. This huge secret on her shoulders. Literally this monkey on her back that she had no way of talking to anybody about, and she was actually being trafficked by her husband.
Okay.
So
you just keep going deeper.
I told you it runs really deep, right? And so when she went into the maintenance stage, now she's having to process all the things that's happened to her, right?
Yeah.
And it can be so overwhelming that they don't feel safe in that environment, right? So they don't go back because they like it. They go back because they feel safe there, because they know how to survive there.
Wow.
And they don't know how to survive in our program. When they come into our safe house, they don't know how to survive in that environment.
It's not natural to them. Do they want to run?
They do want to run.
Wow.
And again, it's not to go back to something they enjoy. I just feel safer there because I know what's expected of me. I know how to survive there. And so I don't know what success looks like here.
Yeah.
Right?
So how long would they be in the program? Someone comes into the Redeemed home.
So what we hope for is that we would have a full 2 years with the women in our house.
Wow.
And then they graduate from the program. We go into a graduate program for up to another 2 years.
Okay.
And then we put them in what we call an independent program.
Okay, so now my business brain is going, and I'm just hearing dollar like that. How do you fund that?
Well, we fund it through some grant from the government.
Okay.
Through the VOCA grant, the Victims of Crime Act.
And that's enough?
No, that's about a third of what we need.
Okay.
A lot of it comes from foundations, private foundations, corporate foundations, individual foundations, corporations, matching funds, individuals, churches.
Okay.
Anywhere. The struggle is we're operating a nonprofit depending on other nonprofits. And so, so the ebb and flow of fund comes in is very difficult. But again, understanding the value, what that looks like. So I always compare it to for donors, understanding that there's 3 elements to what we do. There is, like for a person who gets injured in a car wreck, they're going to go to an emergency room. They're going to get stabilized and assessed. What's the next treatment plan for this person, right, to help them recover from this injury, right? And so they may go into emergency room, they do stabilize them, they assess what is needed, and typically if it's very severe, they're going to go into an intensive care unit.
Right.
And in an intensive care unit, it's specialized help, it's specialized care. And then once they get through the ICU, maybe they've lost a limb, right? And so now they're going to go into rehabilitation. They're going to learn how to live with that loss of a limb, right? And so that's how...
That's your stages.
That's our 3 stages of care. So that's what we do the first 6 months to a year is simply stabilizing a victim, assessing what do they need, right? What are we dealing with here? Were we dealing just with trauma? Are we dealing with addiction? Are we dealing with some kind of mental disorder that also became a part of the vulnerability process? So we stabilize them, and then we go into the intensive care part of it. We have to help, again, this is where the trauma training comes in, to understand what their behaviors are going to look like, what emotions they're going to be dealing with, and how do they cope with those things. And then once they graduate from the intensive care, we're teaching them how you're going to live the rest of your life with this deficiency that's going to be there.
What is your number one need? What if someone said, "Hey, what do you need right now?" What is that?
Well, the thing we need now is, again, always dollars. We need dollars, right?
Money.
Money. I mean, and again, going back to the idea that it's specialized care. It's not something you can just buy off a shelf and give to someone. You have to train people in order to get them to a place of being able to help someone. So that's the big thing, right? And then finding the right people, because this work is not easy.
The right people to work in your facility.
In our facility, because we want to expand what we're doing, right?
So you have a growth plan. I was thinking survival sounds sounds pretty good here.
Yeah, well, we want to grow. I mean, like I said, we've operated our safe house. We're the longest running safe house in the state of Texas, the first and longest running. We're one of the first and longest running in the country now.
Wow.
And so we have a lot of experience.
You're deep experts at this point.
Typically.
For what's around.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like we're learning. We're all learning in this space.
Correct. So we want to expand. One of the things that we've had in the last few years is we've had a lot of women who come in to us who are pregnant, and we cannot mix our populations of people. And so that's one of the things we want to do.
Are they? How is that? They get pregnant?
Well, again,
I mean, I know it's sex, so I understand where babies come from. I don't need that lesson, but I'm like, is that a common thing?
It can be, yes. I mean, either if they've elected not to have an abortion, sometimes they're forced to have an abortion by the trafficker. But if they are with child, and sometimes they want to have children because, again, they're trying to fill that void. Right? Maybe this child will love me like I want to be loved.
Right. Wow.
And so, but because of the nature of the women we have in our current residential program, maybe they've already lost children through different means. And so to bring a woman in who's pregnant can cause negative effects on that woman, right? So we were looking at opening a residential program for a maternity home, basically, for victims.
So for last thing, where do people find you, give you money? Get involved.
So to learn more about us, the website's redeemedtx.org. That's our website. You can also follow us on Facebook at Redeemed Ministries 05. And that's
what
basically...
happened to 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Well, 05 is the year that Redeemed was formed. Was 2005.
Good. I'm glad. I was like,
good you asked that.
There's number 5? Wow. Where's number 1? Bring them in.
Yeah, I mean, there's other organizations under Redeemed Ministries that don't do what we do, and so we had to separate ourselves. So Redeemed Ministries 05 on Facebook. Then you can actually see some of the day stuff going on in the residential program. And so we also are on X, and we also have an Instagram account. So you go to our website, there's links on it that gives you to all of our social media platforms.
Cool. Well, thank you, Dennis, for coming on. Dennis Mark, proud to know you.
Yes,
and,
David.
and the work you do, and thank you for sharing it with everyone today.
Thank you again for having me here today.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.
So thanks for coming, and we'll catch you next time.